The beautiful soul. The one-sidedness of each of the preceding stages is removed when the moral consciousness assumes the attitude of conscience. Here, the individual is at once self-legislating and yet sure of the unity and self-completeness of its own will, in the midst of all diversity of moral content. The immediacy involved in the idea of a self-legislating will appears in the perceptual directness of the action of conscience. It sees what is right and does the right without hesitation, but it is not an abstract faculty of willing independence of the varied content of the individual's moral experience. The universality of the individual permeates and pervades all the content of his being and makes him a concrete moral individuality, at home with himself in the smallest detail, as well as in the larger issues of his self-complete spiritual existence. Conscience, as Butler says, is a system or constitution analogous, in the case of the individual, to the objectified system of the state and its institutions. The self-deception of the second one-sided phase of moral experience seems also to have no place in conscience. For conscience is the transparent and self-revealing unity in all the content of moral individuality. Only on this condition can it be absolutely confident and certain of itself in all its functions. And this certainly of itself is the inalienable characteristic of conscience. It thinks it cannot be deceived about itself, can neither delude itself nor others, but freely realizes all that it professes to be, and professes to be all that it realizes. It is thus the supreme achievement of finite spiritual existence. But it has no meaning apart from the existence of finite spirit in the form of society. Its very conditions, however, give rise to delusion and deception of another kind. For so complete is its world and its life that it may attempt to cut itself off from the concrete substance of actual society, which alone makes possible the existence of conscience. It then tries to cultivate goodness in solitary isolation from the actual social whole. This is the attitude of the beautiful soul, a type of spiritual life cultivated by the Moravians and familiar during the Romantic movement. Novalis is the best known example. The classical interpretation of the mood was given in Goethe's Meister Lahaj, Book 6. It has the self-confidence and individual inspiration of conscience, but frankly rejects the concrete objectivity which secures for conscience liberation from mere subjectivity. The very rejection of objectivity is the only achievement of the beautiful soul, and is held to be the greatest triumph of its self-conscious freedom. It flees from concrete moral action and luxuriates in a state of self-hypnotized inactivity. Still, it takes up this attitude in the interests of pure goodness, and hence in withdrawing From the lowly deeds of the daily moral life, it indulges all the more in the self-cloistered cult of the beauty of holiness. It is moral individualism turned into mystic self-absorption. Hegel's analysis brings out that this type of spirit is in principle, as it was in fact, the direct ally of moral evil. For one, its refusal to act means indifference to all action, good and bad alike, and the rejection of the demands of duty is precisely immorality. 2. Its self-closed isolation destroys the very principle of true morality, universality of will, recognition, and acknowledgement by others of the claims of the individual will. But this extremity of finite spiritual experience is the opportunity of absolute spirit. The attitude of this mystical moral individuality is indirectly an indication of the finitude of the moral point of view, and therefore of its failure to supply the absolute self-completeness which spirit requires. The very consciousness by finite spirit of its inherent incompleteness is implicitly a consciousness of the absolute spirit. The consciousness of absolute spirit is the attitude of experience known as religion.